Guardians of the Galaxy 3 has a lot of laughs behind the scenes, of course, but also a ton of heart. We get to find out exactly how insecure Chris Pratt was playing Star-Lord, the emotional arc of Nebula, who wasn't even supposed to make it past the first movie, and just how technical and complex Rocket's performance is, outside of the visual effects. The first MCU flop. That's basically what everyone was saying about Guardians of the Galaxy before the first film came out. The cast was super insecure about the movie's premiere and their performance when filming because there was a ton of hate for it before it even got to the screen. So obviously when that didn't happen, more like the opposite happened, everyone was really proud. For the final day of shooting Guardians of the Galaxy 3, Chris Pratt gave a pretty hilarious speech when he read all of those hate clippings about the movie.
You know, say, hey, we overcame a lot to get where we are, and boy, we weren't supposed to be what we are.
Obviously, it was quite the emotional day for everyone involved. When we think Star-Lord, we will always think of Chris Pratt. James Gunn felt the same way as soon as he walked in for his audition. Before Chris, he went through dozens and dozens of different auditions trying to find the right fit. But before Chris Pratt's audition even began, he knew right away that he was the one.
It's meant so much. It was like being drafted onto a winning NFL team or something, you know?
Something interesting about this hand-in-glove vibe when James Gunn found Chris for Star-Lord was the fact that nobody else saw him playing the role. There was one particular article he saw before his audition.
The 25 actors we could see playing Star-Lord. And I wasn't on it. None of them were me.
Kinda funny how these things end up working out.
Thank God that James saw something in me and wanted to make me the character.
It's actually crazy to think that Karen Gillan signed up for this role thinking that her entire shoot process would be 8 days long, and that Nebula wouldn't even live through the first film.
Now here I am, 10 years later, and I'm an official Guardian!
So yeah, they rewrote her ending not once, but twice, ultimately deciding not to cut her out of the film, which, obviously, we love. Because of that alone, Karen was super emotional when she saw the script for the third film. She actually shed quite a few tears because of it.
But we read it and just like both were crying together. But there was also tears of laughter too.
Not to hype it up or anything, but Chris Pratt says this movie has the best musical score out of every film in the trilogy. A big part of the music stems from Yondu finding the Zune in his junker shop. That sorta paved the way for them to curate the playlist however they wanted.
We've opened it up and allowed for some iconic songs to come in.
James Gunn took his time to really curate the playlist full of what Chris Pratt describes as sleeper hits. You'll have to leave a comment and let me know what your favorite song on the soundtrack is. For all of you Chris Pratt fans out there was a hyper-realistic, life-size version doll of him somewhere in the prop room for this film. You probably noticed in the trailer when Nebula was carrying Star-Lord. It was super creepy for Chris to see it for the first time because it looked so real. He had a really unsettling, visceral reaction to it.
It was the strangest thing to see. An incredibly lifelike but dead version of yourself is something that I hope no one here ever sees.
It definitely sounds creepy, not gonna lie. But there was no way Karen Gillan could carry Chris like that for all those takes they had to do. One thing I really want to know is, where is that doll now?
Who's got that in their office
Where did that
and
go?
why?
The doll was made out of foam, and it wasn't exactly light.
Yeah, I had to put it down in between takes.
But it was definitely a lot easier for her than carrying the actual Chris. So one thing I love about this third installment is how much focus is on Rocket. We know that Bradley Cooper does the voice acting, but something that often goes underfocused is Sean Gunn's actual acting when it comes to the infamous raccoon. He spent a ton of hours doing motion capture for the film that should definitely not go unnoticed.
And those eye movements, everything that he does, it's all tracked off of Sean's performance.
So yeah, obviously Rocket is CGI, but what we're actually looking at when we look at his facial expressions are the incredible acting skills of Sean Gunn.
It is an amalgamation of Sean and Bradley and, you know, the visual effects artists.
So oftentimes, especially when it came to some emotionally poignant moments, the actors would watch Sean's performance that he did in motion capture to really understand the emotional nature of the scene before acting it out. Something we get to find out in this third film is how Rocket got to be who he is, and apparently, according to James Gunn, we gotta get those tissue boxes ready.
Because it's a very sad story. Rocket's backstory is very sad.
It all comes back to that childhood trauma.
And as time has gone on, he's reacted to that by becoming a tough guy.
James Gunn feels super connected to Rocket. He used to collect raccoon figurines when he was a kid, so getting to create this storyline was a huge emotional element for him, especially given the fact that his own brother got to play him.
Going through that journey, that's the reason that I wanted to finish this movie, is to tell that story.
He also pulled a lot from his own childhood journey that helped create an extremely personal narrative through the eyes of Rocket Raccoon. So, as I've already mentioned, James Gunn pulled from his own childhood experience to write Rocket's story.
Kind of used my anger to push everybody away from me and, used my humor to push everybody away from me.
It was a really personal story for him to tell. Plus, his love of raccoons and animals in general shifted throughout the story's narrative in a big way. When he was on his own little journey growing up, he was sort of like Rocket and couldn't let anyone get emotionally close to him.
I've learned that, you can let people in, you can trust other people sometimes, you can be vulnerable.
James Gunn worked closely with Bradley Cooper as well to develop the right voice and portrayal of the character. Apparently, James had envisioned this third movie from the very beginning and had always called it a love letter to Rocket.
Once you understand the origins of all the behavior, I think it changes the way you perceive it.
Bradley Cooper recommends, after learning Rocket's story in the final installment, to actually go back and rewatch the first two with your new knowledge. Unfortunately, I can't say that I have the reel, but from what I've gathered, there are a ton of fun moments behind the scenes with the cast and crew.
Thank God I don't operate the camera for this movie, because if I did, it would look terrible.
Okay, but I can't say I wouldn't watch that version in full, though. I'm sure there would be some great behind-the-scenes moments captured.
We're genuine fans, so there's something really sweet about geeking out on set.
There was definitely a bittersweet note to the culmination of the film, because over this past decade, they've all developed such a close friendship and bond. Will Poulter went through a huge physical transformation to play the role of Adam Warlock. He definitely gives major credit to his team of personal trainers and people who helped care for his mental health during the process.
I had so much of the hard work done for me. It was actually my job just to kind of train and eat.
There was also a lot of discussion about his character psychologically because his birth was sort of teased at the end of the second movie. So they had to figure out the way they wanted to take this story. They ended up going with the idea of his infancy and embracing that aspect. So he had to kind of play up the fact that he basically has no clue what's going on and what the difference between right and wrong is. Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 is definitely taking us on an emotional ride to close out this epic, decade-long chapter. We've got Sean Gunn's heart-wrenching performance as Rocket, the absolute insane chemistry the cast has developed over the years, and of course, the Chris Pratt doll that I will be personally scouring eBay for. What are your favorite moments from the Guardians?